At 7:00 a.m., ladders slammed into my roof hard enough to shake the entire house. I ran outside barefoot and saw HOA workers already climbing phones, raised filming like they'd caught me committing a crime. The lake beside my home was perfectly still, the sky clear and blue, while my driveway turned into pure chaos. "Stop. Get off my roof. Now." Karen didn't even look at me. "Navy blue is a violation," she said flatly. "Document everything. Begin removal immediately." One man pried up my shingles. Another slapped a notice on my gate, $1.250 per day. I grabbed Karen's clipboard. "Touch one more shingle and I call the police." She stepped closer, smiling. "Call whoever you want. By tonight, that roof won't be yours." Something inside me cracked, but I stayed calm. "Fine," I said. "I'll repaint it." She laughed. "Good. You have 24 hours. I looked up at my roof, then back at her. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll fix it to code." The next day she came back furious, and when she looked up, her face went pale. Her own face was staring down from my roof. I smiled and said, "If you want to control every square inch of my roof, then you're going to have to look at yourself on it." Karen Whitmore didn't ask questions. She issued orders. "Secure the perimeter," she said, snapping her fingers at the compliance crew. "Photograph every angle. If it's Navy, it comes off." The crew moved instantly, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times before. Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was also the county neighborhood oversight chair, a title she repeated often, usually right before reminding people how easily paperwork could ruin their lives. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair, tailored blazer. Even in July, she dressed like authority and expected the same reaction. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. Control was her default setting. She walked my driveway like it already belonged to her. "I've already cleared this with a fire safety consultant," she said, casually tapping her clipboard. "Dark, non-approved colors absorb heat. Liability, nightmare. You don't want to be responsible for that." She smiled when she said it, thin, practiced, satisfied. Karen believed rules weren't meant to be followed. They were meant to be used, bent when convenient, sharpened when someone pushed back. She thrived in public scenes, loved an audience, loved watching people shrink when she spoke in official tones. Then she finally said the real reason just once. "The neighborhood is transitioning into our recoat program," she explained. "Uniform colors, approved contractors, streamlined compliance. You repaint now or you repaint later with penalties." That's when I understood. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about color. It was about forcing me to submit and proving she could. After the 7 a.m. showdown, the HOA workers didn't leave. Instead, they climbed back up and removed a full strip of shingles, laying them neatly on my lawn like a warning display. Karen called it pulling a sample. She said it loudly so the neighbors could hear. Within an hour, bright yellow compliance tape was stretched across my driveway. A laminated notice was zip-tied to my gate, restricted area.OA, inspection in progress. I wasn't allowed near my own roof. When a couple across the street stopped to watch, Karen took control of the story. "He's refusing to correct a violation," she announced, pointing at me. "We gave him a chance." I walked up and told the crew to stop. Calm. Clear. No shouting. Karen stepped between us. "You don't get to interrupt this." "Yes, I do," I said. "It's my house." She smiled tight, satisfied, and leaned in just enough for me to hear. "You have 24 hours, she said. "Paint it charcoal gray, approved contractor, or the fines start tomorrow morning." I looked past her at the workers still standing on my roof. "And if I don't," her smile widened, "then this becomes expensive, very fast." The crew hesitated. They were waiting for a signal from her or from me. I told them to climb down. This time they did. Karen didn't argue. She just wrote something on her clipboard and said loud enough for everyone nearby, "He's choosing non-compliance." That night, while she prepared her paperwork, I opened the HOA bylaws. If she was giving me 24 hours to fix my roof, I was going to use every minute. The official notice arrived less than 12 hours later, not by regular mail, not by email. A courier knocked on my door at 8:33 a.m., clipboard in hand, asking me to sign. Across the top in bold letters, "Final aesthetic correction demand, 24 hours remaining." According to the letter, my navy roof had to be repainted charcoal gray by the next morning. Failure to comply would trigger stacking daily fines, legal fees, and an accelerated lien process. No appeal, no hearing, just consequences. Attached was a glossy document titled HOA Approved Color Standards. It looked official, logos, formatting, footnotes. But something felt off. By noon, Karen returned. This time she brought a man wearing a polo shirt with a flame icon stitched on the chest. "This is our fire safety consultant," she announced to anyone within earshot. "He's here to document the thermal risk created by your roof." The consultant raised a handheld scanner and pointed it at my house like a weapon. "Dark blues absorb excessive heat," Karen said confidently. "That's a hazard. We can't ignore it." I asked one simple question. "Can you show me where that's written in the fire code?" The consultant hesitated. Karen answered for him. "We don't need to argue technicalities." That was the moment I stopped listening to her voice and started watching her paperwork. That night I compared the color chart to the HOA bylaws. There was no vote, no amendment, no homeowner approval. The so-called standard was just an internal file uploaded 3 years ago, authored by Karen herself. She wasn't enforcing the rules. She was inventing them. And she had given me exactly 24 hours to respond. I sent Karen one sentence before sunrise. "I will comply fully with HOA color requirements within the allotted time." Her reply came back in under 5 minutes. "Good. Make sure it's charcoal." She thought I'd broken. By mid-morning, a new crew arrived, my crew. No HOA logos, no clipboards, just ladders, tarps, and quiet efficiency. From the street, it looked like surrender. The Navy disappeared under the first coats of gray layer by careful layer. Karen drove past twice. She slowed. She smiled. She waved. By noon, the roof looked dull and compliant. Exactly what she wanted to see. What she didn't see happened after dark. I waited until the neighborhood lights went out. Then I climbed the ladder myself, carrying a tablet, a grid printout, and a set of carefully labeled paint cans, every shade, a legal grayscale. No blues, no color, just math. I had broken her public photo into hundreds of squares. Each square had a tone. Each tone had a place. Square by square, her face emerged. The curve of the cheek, the sharp line of the jaw, the mouth caught mid-command. There was nothing written, no words, no symbols, just geometry and contrast, exactly what the bylaws allowed. By dawn, the image was unmistakable. I covered the roof with a heavy blue tarp cinched tight at the edges. From the street it looked like routine curing. Boring. Temporary. Karen emailed once more that afternoon. "Inspection tomorrow at noon. Final." I replied with the same sentence I'd already sent her. "I have complied with every requirement." At that point, this wasn't about paint or fines anymore. If she wanted obedience, she was about to get it documented, compliant, and impossible to undo. Karen didn't wait for morning. By 9:30 p.m., headlights washed over my front lawn. I peeked through the blinds and saw her golf cart parked crooked at the curb, clipboard tucked under one arm like a weapon. She craned her neck, trying to see past the tarp, irritation written all over her face. She circled the house once, then twice. At 10:15, my phone buzzed. "Why is the roof still covered? Remove the tarp immediately." I didn't respond. The next morning, just after sunrise, she escalated. Karen arrived again, this time with the fire safety consultant in tow. They stood in my driveway, staring up at the tarp like it was personally insulting her authority. "I need visual confirmation," she snapped. "Now." The consultant raised his thermal scanner and swept it slowly across the covered roof. He frowned, adjusted the settings, and scanned again. "Surface temperature is within normal range," he said finally. "If it's grayscale underneath, there's no fire code issue." Karen's jaw tightened. "That tarp has been up too long," she argued. "Temporary structures aren't allowed past 48 hours. It's construction," the consultant replied. "And it's still curing." That word curing stopped her cold. Neighbors had begun to gather, not openly, just enough heads peeking from porches to make Karen aware she had an audience. She tried once more. "If I find even a single shade out of compliance," I cut in calmly. "You'll do what you've already threatened." She stared at me, eyes narrow, then pulled out her phone and typed furiously. At 1:10 a.m., I received the final email. "Final compliance inspection scheduled for tomorrow at noon. All board members will be present. Failure will result in immediate enforcement." I replied with one line. "I have followed every line of the bylaws." Karen read it, then she smiled. She thought the tarp was hiding my defeat. She had no idea it was hiding hers. The clock was already working against me. Karen hadn't just given me a deadline, she'd turned it into a countdown the entire neighborhood could see. By late afternoon, HOA emails were flying. Final compliance inspection, mandatory attendance, full board, consultant present, cameras allowed. Noon the next day. Exactly 24 hours after her ultimatum, she wanted an audience for my failure. That evening, she parked her golf cart at the end of the street like a sentry. Anyone walking past heard the same line. He had a full day. He chose not to comply. I didn't correct her. While she performed certainty, I checked the tarp again, every strap tight, every edge sealed. Underneath it, the work was finished. Set. Cured. There was no undoing it now. At 6:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. Reminder, inspection at noon. Tarp must be removed on site. No delays will be tolerated. I replied with one sentence. Inspection should be conducted publicly, with the tarp removed in front of the board. 3 minutes passed. Then, her response came back. Agreed. That single word told me everything. She believed I'd caved. Believed the tarp was hiding a rushed repaint job, uneven shades proof she'd been right all along. She was already planning how she'd phrase the fines. By 1:30 a.m., golf carts lined the curb. Board members gathered in small clusters. Neighbors drifted closer, pretending they were just curious. Karen arrived last dressed, sharp clipboard tucked under her arm. She stepped into my driveway and glanced at her watch. 24 hours, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. You ready to admit you lost? I didn't answer. I walked to the side of the house and placed my hand on the rope holding the tarp. Karen raised her hand. Remove it. The street went silent, and as I pulled, the tarp began to slide, taking her certainty with it. Karen stepped into the middle of my driveway like it was a courtroom she owned. Remove the tarp, she ordered, voice sharp, clipboard already angled to write the ending she'd rehearsed all night. I didn't argue. I didn't speak. I wrapped my hand around the rope and pulled. The tarp slid down slowly, fabric scraping against tile, heavy and deliberate. Sunlight poured over the roof all at once, flashing off thousands of gray squares. And then silence. Not the polite kind, the stunned kind. No one moved. The board members froze. The fire safety consultant stopped mid-scan. Even the lake behind the houses seemed to hold its breath. Karen tilted her head back. She squinted, took one step forward, then another. Her posture stiffened as recognition crept across her face. The color drained from her skin. Her own face stared back at her from above, rendered in hard geometry, frozen in grayscale, enormous and undeniable. Karen's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She lifted a hand as if to point, then dropped it. Her clipboard slipped slightly in her grip. For a long moment she just stood there, locked in place, staring at herself towering over the street while everyone else stared at her. That's my face, Karen finally said, her voice breaking the silence, but doing nothing to control it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gesture dramatically. I just spoke steady and clear so everyone could hear. Article 5 of the HOA bylaws, I said. Exterior finishes must be monochrome shades of gray. Patterns are prohibited unless geometric in nature. I looked up at the roof, then back at the board. Every tile up there is grayscale. No color, no text, no symbols, just geometry. Karen spun toward the fire safety consultant. Tell them it's a hazard. Tell them it violates code. He hesitated, then glanced down at his tablet and scanned the roof again. Once, twice, his shoulders dropped. Thermal readings are normal, he said. No fire safety violation. Technically, it complies. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Board members began flipping through binders pages, snapping open in a rush. One of them stopped, reread a section, then shook his head slowly. There's nothing in the rules that prohibits this, he said, as long as it's monochrome and geometric. Karen stared at him like he'd betrayed her. I'm just reading the bylaws, he replied. The rules she'd weaponized were now working against her, and everyone could see it. This is harassment, Karen snapped, her composure finally cracking. He did this to humiliate me. This is a personal attack. She turned toward the board, voice rising sharp and uncontrolled. I warned you about that navy roof from the start. I told you it was unacceptable. Unacceptable. The word landed wrong. One of the board members looked up from the bylaws. Unacceptable because of what exactly? Karen hesitated just for a second too long. Because it looked wrong, she blurted. It ruined the appearance of the street. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Another board member slowly closed his binder. So this wasn't about safety. And not about compliance, someone else added quietly. Karen shook her head, backing up. You're twisting this. You're all twisting this. The fire safety consultant took a step away, suddenly very interested in his phone. Neighbors began whispering openly now. A few phones were raised, recording. The chair cleared his throat. For the record, the president has just admitted enforcement based on personal preference. Karen's face drained of color. Effective immediately, the chair continued. Enforcement authority is suspended pending review. You can't do this, Karen said, her voice thin. We already have. She gathered her clipboard with trembling hands and turned away, walking fast down the driveway past the board, past the neighbors, under the unblinking stare of her own face on my roof. The inspection dissolved into chaos, and Karen never looked back. No one left right away. People lingered in my driveway, staring up at the roof, then back at the empty space where Karen had been standing just minutes earlier. The tension that had ruled this neighborhood for years seemed to drain out of the air all at once. A woman from 2 houses down stepped closer. "She made us repaint our garage twice," she said quietly. "Once because it was too warm, then again because it was too cold." Another neighbor laughed an actual laugh. She fined me for a flagpole shadow crossing the sidewalk. More voices followed. Stories I'd never heard or only half heard in whispers. Forced repairs. Arbitrary deadlines. Letters that arrived designed to scare, not correct. The same clipboard. The same smile. What surprised me most wasn't the anger. It was the relief. People weren't shouting anymore. They were smiling, shaking their heads, making jokes about color charts and rulers. The fear that had kept everyone silent had cracked, and once it did, it didn't come back. Someone snapped a photo of the roof. Someone else asked if they could stand in my driveway and take a video. I didn't stop them. For the first time since I moved in, the HOA didn't feel like an authority. It felt small. Once the noise died down, the board had no choice but to put everything on record. Karen hadn't just overstepped, she'd stacked violations. First, she enforced a color standard that was never voted on, never ratified, and never added to the recorded bylaws. The so-called official palette was nothing more than an internal file she authored herself. That alone invalidated every fine she'd issued under it. Second, she authorized partial demolition of my roof without consent, claiming sampling authority that didn't exist. No emergency, no warrant, no legal right to touch private property. Third, she misrepresented fire safety regulations, repeatedly invoking a consultant to intimidate homeowners, despite knowing there was no code violation. Emails confirmed she used heat risk language as leverage, not fact. And finally, she publicly admitted enforcement based on personal preference, not compliance, something the board couldn't ignore once it was said out loud in front of witnesses. The consequences followed fast. All fines were voided. Every notice tied to the recoat program was withdrawn. The program itself was terminated immediately, pending a full audit of past enforcement. Karen's authority to issue violations was suspended on the spot. That same evening, an emergency board vote removed her as HOA president and referred her actions for legal review, including potential civil liability for unauthorized property damage. The rules hadn't changed. The person abusing them was gone. I didn't rush to change anything. For a while, I left the roof exactly the way it was, quiet, compliant, and impossible to ignore. Not out of spite, but because it served as a reminder. Not just to Karen, but to everyone who had lived under the same pressure and stayed silent. Then one calm afternoon, I climbed the ladder again. This time, there was no crew. No inspectors. No deadlines taped to my gate. Just a roller, a bucket, and the color I'd chosen from the start, a deep, steady navy blue that matched the lake beside my house. I painted slowly. From the street, the roof returned to normal, clean, simple. Exactly the kind of thing no one would ever measure or argue over again. But paint doesn't erase structure. From above, from the right angle, in the right light, the geometry was still there. The faint outline of a face embedded beneath the surface. Not obvious, not loud, just present. I stepped back onto the lawn and looked up, feeling something settle inside me. The HOA could control guidelines. They could write rules and threaten fines. But they couldn't control intent. They couldn't control ingenuity. And they couldn't control how a homeowner chose to comply. They tried to own my roof. All they really did was teach me where their power ended.